Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Rally Show with me, Bob Irvin. And this week, I'm very pleased to have Jon Desborough, sports presenter, commentator, broadcaster. Is that about right, Jon?
That'll do.
That'll do. Thanks very much for coming on, Jon. How are you?
Pleasure. I'm very well. Keeping warm at this time of year with the frost. You know, you get the frost up there, but I'm down in Dorset. That's the epicenter of British rallying, he said, ironically. And we never get snow down here. So it's a bit unusual having to turn the heating up.
We were -7 -10. And just up in Braemar, it was -15. So
yeah, well, Braemar's always frosty, isn't it, up there?
Even in the middle of June. Anyway. Right, Jon, let's get into your career. You started off, was it cricket you covered in the early days? In fact, why did you get into broadcasting in the first place? What took you down that road?
Because I think by the time I was a late teen, I wasn't good for anything else, and I probably couldn't hold down a proper job. I went to university, and to cut a long story short, got introduced to hospital radio, and liked what happened to hospital radio. I went abroad. The only job I could find was working on an English language radio station. The first thing I covered was sport, because in our family, we kids were all sport mad. And then when I came out from university, I thought I'd try and get some kind of job on the local radio. One opened up, which for me was in Luton in Bedfordshire. It was a brand new BBC local radio station. They were all big, and they were all opening up in the middle 80s. And they threw me a biscuit, they gave me a chance and said, listen, go on the sports show, see if you can get down yourself to, I don't know where it was, Abbots Langley or somewhere in Watford, and cover this game of cricket. Now, I don't think they supplied, Bob, the 5, 10p coins that I had to put through the old phone machine that we had back in those days for the beeps. And that was the very first thing I did, was to phone back reports on how the cricket was going. And it wasn't raining. But I do remember they came in for tea once, and I had to go on air. They came to me live. And all the 22 players and all the officials were having, tea and cakes the way they do at half time. And I thought, well, here we go. Got a live crowd for the very first time. I might as well just press on. And I did, and they gave me a round of applause when I finished. So I thought, there must be something in this.
So how did that lead on, to the rallying, for example? Did you have in-between stuff after that?
Oh, listen, it's a long and circuitous route. They gave me a job to cover football. I left them and went to a radio station in London, then got into Sky News when that was setting up. That was another being their story. And then in 2001, unknown to me, David Richards was trying to move the rights for the World Rally Championship in Britain from the BBC to Channel 4. I heard about this, got on my knees in front of Channel 4 and said, listen, is there any chance you could take me and let me present the thing? They lowered their standards and allowed me in. And the rest of it is history from there on. But it goes back to meeting Richard Burns in 1999. Same year I met Colin McRae. Same year I met Tommy Mackinnon, because in that year there was something going on where a lot of these teams, Mitsubishi, Ford, Subaru, were all putting on what you call passenger days for the burgeoning news media that was coming up, like Sky News, like BBC News. There was probably a CNN back in those days. They shoved us in the seat. They drove us all crazy, made us sick, made us scream, and it made good telly. And in that year, I met Richard at Cornbury Park and had a passenger ride with him around Cornbury Park, which that year I think was part of the it might have been the network queue in those days. Mm-hmm. And Bob, it was a life changer. At that point, I thought, Formula One is actually a little bit tedious and a bit boring. This is quite something. And halfway through this stage, which Burnsy took at over 100 miles an hour, and I thought he was going to kill us many times, he span the car around on the tarmac and turned to me and said, did you enjoy that? And there was about a 30-second pause while I just kind of got my bearings together and tried to understand what had happened, because all it was just streak after streak of colourful horizontal lines going by, and him going through the gears. Oh, and shouting to me, what does it say down there between your knees? And I said, what do you mean? He said, down there. What's the number? And of course, I looked down at what would have been Robert Reed's, readout back in those days, little red numbers on a black background. And I shouted back, it's 160. What is that? What does that mean? And he said, that's our speed in kilometres an hour. And I thought that's not bad. We've only been in the car for about half a mile. That's not bad. And
is that your introduction to the sport?
That was my.
Were you a rally fan when you were young?
No, I was never a rally fan. I used to watch it on Grandstand, ironically, but wasn't really aware of what was going on. But after that, I certainly was. Got a chance to do Greystoke, I think, with Colin in the Ford, because he moved to Ford that year. Tommy Macklin took me around the rally stage at Silverstone one night, again in the build-up to the Rally of Great Britain, the Network Q. And at that point, I thought, this is really something. This is adventurous. This is exotic. This is actually slightly dangerous and mad. There are two people involved here, so it's much more of a team. It goes on throughout the night. These people are all crazy. I love it. I need to find a way to get involved. Getting to know Richard was an absolute joy, because he was one of those few people, Bob, that could actually put you, in his case, in his seat and describe to you what he was doing and how he would do it. He was that lucid and clever. Colin was the other end of the scale. He just did it with all swagger and bravery, and very few words, and required you to understand what was going on. He was the known name at that point because of the PlayStation game. Everybody on the planet knew the name Colin McRae because he'd been made famous by that. Moving to Ford meant there was that advert with him and Jimmy on the telly as well, so they'd broken out away from rallying into a bigger audience. And Tommy Macklin was just Tommy Macklin. He was the 4 times champion. So it was a fantastic place to be. They were very welcoming, very hospitable. And when I heard that the rights for the show, they were going to go to Channel 4, they wanted to make a big song and dance about it. They wanted to go live every night, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Then I simply had to find a way to get involved, and thankfully I did.
That must have been a dream come true, John.
Oh, it was fantastic, because it was a ticket around the world, following this crazy sport with all these iconic people, learning it as I went. Didn't really understand how it all worked. Went to places on the globe with names I couldn't pronounce in countries I didn't know exist, and had just the most amazing time. And I just wish it had carried on for a little bit longer. But Channel 4, I think, had been promised that this would be as big as Formula One. This was going to be better than Michael Schumacher winning all of those Formula One races. And then Formula One was getting boring just as we got into this millennium, this century. And it didn't quite work out that way. I think the best audience we ever had was Sweden in 2002, which was about 2 million people, which I know sounds a little bit mealy-mouthed for me now to say 2 million wasn't enough, because 2 million these days, imagine that. Imagine if the sport had 2 million people watching it, it'd be terrific. But it wasn't quite enough for Channel 4, and then they sold it on to ITV. That became a little more modest. And then at the end of 2005, it was gone, and it had, disappeared. And, is now run by Germans and has another French world champion, and it's all gone off to a different place.
And there's not even a Rally of Great Britain anymore as well.
No, great shame. But there's a lot of people around the world that just want to use it to, put their countries and their people on the map. And, we go to some places that you probably wouldn't have thought there would be any kind of around. Croatia, why would you want to go there? Except to see the tarmac, which is that special tarmac out there. It's just a great shame. We can't go back to Wales, or spread it about to a bit of Scotland, a bit of Wales, come through some manor houses the way we used to.
It doesn't look likely, John. What was I going to say? I mean, you were obviously good at the Channel 4 thing, the presenting. You were talking about, you got this gig. You were shortlisted, weren't you, for a prize? Is that right, for sports presenter?
Yeah, I was. I remember getting a call from the head of the production company saying, "We got you into the TV Sports Oscars, alongside 2 people you may have heard of, one called Gary Lineker and another one being Claire Balding." And there I was. It was a bit like the Oscars that night, and I kind of looked at these two and I thought, well, I haven't got a hope in hell here. I'm going to come a very long third. But the show that year won a Royal Television Society award, I think, for its production or for one of the programs, because back in those days we had helicopters. We did helicopter to helicopter, over the plains in south of Nairobi in Kenya for the safari. So, I mean, Channel 4 threw money at it, and it was a fantastic time to be involved. It really was. So, it was good to be there. But, I'm afraid Gary Lineker beat me to that one, Bob.
Close thing. No doubt close. Why do you think it didn't quite work out for Channel 4? Do you think it rallying? I mean, I love the sport; it's in my blood. It's all I've ever known, John. But I do wonder: is it big enough to go mainstream television, or is it just a kind of wee wish it was, but it really isn't?
You could look at France now, and I don't think it's really, really big in France. And yet they've had the whole ball game for 20 years with the two Sebs. They really could have made something of it. The more I talk about this now and look back to what happened 20 years ago, the more I realise that maybe we were just a little bit too late with this. If David Richards had been able to, perhaps he wasn't at the time. It would have been great if he had got the rights to it as the millennium broke. So we had the year 2000, 2001. So we had that rivalry between Burns and McRae. By the time we got it in 2002, Colin had moved on. The technology was changing, the cars were changing. Colin wasn't getting on with the Citroen in 2003. And I always wound up Burnsy towards the end of his year, end of his life, that I'd moved there to see him win, and I never actually got to see him win. Well, I did get to see him win in Argentina, but then he won because they took it off Marcus, and then in the end they gave it to Carlos Sainz on a plane coming home in the summer of 2002. And I just wonder if they'd been a little bit earlier to it. We could have had, we could have covered Brit winning, and that would have built the gig. It would have got a bigger following. The TV companies would have believed in it. But it was all a little bit unknown to the people who made the decisions. Despite the fact that we turned it into a travel log in the second year, 2003, went to all the European countries to show them where we were going to go, what we were going to drive on, the towns and the villages we would go through. It all made perfect sense to me. It was just so great and so exotic and so colourful, so international. It's fantastic. But you know what TV's like. It's show business, not show charity. So the business end of it wasn't working out, I suppose. So it didn't happen.
How was it working with Penny, Mallory, and Robbie Head, etc.?
Oh, they were good company. They were good company. I mean, Robbie we used to call the junior presenter because that was his first job on TV. Penny had worked on. Was it Pulling Power was the name of the car show I think she worked on. So she was, well known to doing TV. And Jeremy, who was the commentator, I think he had covered the sport for 2 or 3 years beforehand. So we were all slotted into the kind of roles that we should have had and where we belonged, where we were natural. We were round pegs and round holes. And we kind of blended a little bit. But it was a wonderful show to work on. But there was so much about it that had the word new in front of it. So much of what we were doing hadn't been done before. Channel 4 were very brave to get involved. And it was a kind of blend of talents. And we did have a great time. It's just a shame it couldn't continue.
Well, leading on from that, John, what do you think of the coverage in 2022?
Oh, I think it's terrific, but in a way, I have to say that because I signed a contract with a promoter who puts on TV kits, so I've got to kind of be respectful of the product. But who could have guessed 20 years ago that we'd have helicopters on every stage? We'd have onboard cameras, and then we'd go live to cars. Cameras hidden in wheel arches and almost in the engine and above the co-driver and the driver. Almost you can read the notes. All this technology has really worked out in our favour. I just wish that we could get it back onto a mainline TV station in this country and just let them get a taste of it. They would see what it was like and see how exotic it was, how crazy and dangerous and ever so slightly batty it was, and then they might go with it again. But again, another thing which I don't think has worked in our favour is that a lot of kids who got into cars, like we did, back in the 80s or 90s maybe, have got into bikes since the Olympics in London in 2012. All those sitting on sports, we've got rowers, we've got horse riders, we had thousands of people on bikes, and everybody's got bikes. And bikes seem to be the fashion and have been the fashion for a while. And the car has kind of, drifted away and is now looked at as this smoking, polluting piece of equipment that actually isn't necessary. We shouldn't have it. And I meant to go back to Dave Richards again. When he became chairman of Motorsport UK, I said, what do you hope to do? And he said, I just hope to get teenagers as enthused about cars as I was when I was a teenager back in the 70s. And so whether that's worked or not, I don't know, but I think we're a bit more niche than we were 20 years ago.
I mean, you've obviously been around the sport for a long time. Do you think, I mean, when you look at the modern technology, John, the cameras and the arches, in-car, everything, I think there's a few complaints going about saying there's not enough stage side cameras. Is it possible that the modern gizmos are overtaking what people want?
Yeah, very, very definitely, yes. There's probably an element of cost saving in there, in that you can strap these little GoPros into the cars. They'll talk to a helicopter and a plane and beam the signal back to somewhere in the world in 0.3 of a second. Whereas the stage side cameras are just they're heavier. There's more of them. They've got to be cable. They've got to be this. They've got to be that. But you're right, I think. And people who worry about this are right, because the stage side cameras give you the perspective that actually we get when we look at cameras. We look at cars. We get them coming past. They're quite right. There's no better shot than the car coming past the camera at a meter off the ground, and we miss that. The helicopter tends to flatten all the geography that we're on, but bring some fantastic shots. Although they're probably about 500 quid an hour to fly those things. But there is a tendency just to slot back to the onboard and rely on that, and they don't tell the story. They don't do the sport justice, I don't think. But maybe in the future there'll be a few more. I don't know. One thing I do know is it's better than it was in 2021. Sorry, 2001.
Yeah. I mean, you're obviously a fan as well as a presenter and stuff. You obviously love the sport. What do you think about the fact that the entries are a third of the size they used to be and stuff like that?
Yes, because
the REC used to be 200 cars. And it seems very deliberate now that they're brought down to 30, 40 cars.
Really, on the TV programmes on All Live, we only cover about the top 10. Yeah. Next year, they do want to get more into the lower classes. So the support classes, the 2, the 3, the Masters, the Juniors, all those sorts of things, I think they will give more prominence to, and there'll be more awareness of, which is a great thing, because all of those drivers and crews are struggling to get cash together. And the simple fact is a WRC2 season minimum is what, 500 to 750,000 euros. Well, how are you going to get that together? And if you think you are an up-and-coming driver with some talent and some ability, it's going to take you a season or 2 or maybe 3 now to prove to some of these people that you actually can be trusted with a £750,000 car with all that modern hybrid technology in it, and you're not going to stick it into the first wall or tree on the first corner, because the stakes have gone higher, and it has become quite corporate. Toyota put a big budget in. Hyundai put a big budget in. Malcolm is involved as well. So it's 3 teams. But maybe because it's got so expensive, we now need to. I don't know how we bring it back down or how we encourage others to come in. But we know there's 3 times as many drivers, crews as in WRC2, 3 in the juniors as there are in the top line. It's not quite so exciting to look at, but there's drama there, there's stories there, there's cliff edge moments, there's the people that that don't make it, and they do make it. It's against the odds. There's a puncture here, there's something gets damaged there. There are great stories and good drama and TV programs to be made out of those. But I suppose what I'm saying is it's become much more corporate, much more expensive. And I can hear Malcolm Wilson or David Lapworth at ProDrive saying to me, John, when the championship started, there were only 2 manufacturers involved. And actually, it wasn't so long ago that there were only 3 manufacturers involved. It was us, Ford, and one other. And here we are now. Back 20 years ago, there was Citroën, Peugeot, Hyundai, Ford, on and on and on it went. But it's pricey, Bob, as we know.
I know. There's been a lot of talk, John, about trying to encourage more manufacturers, obviously. And a lot of people think that R5 is the way to go. Rally 2. And just do away with Rally 1, because all over Europe, there's loads of these cars. What do you think of that? Do you think that the WRC should be the highest echelon of the sport?
It's going to be whether we like it or not. But I think you're right. There's a lot to be made out of the R5 or Rally 2, as I think they call it, out of WRC2. The technology in there is improving. There are a lot of brands involved in there. Ford, Hyundai, and Toyota this coming year, 2023, will be involved in that. So there will be a lot of stars in the making, teams, crews in the making. There'll be a lot of things happening. I think that's a growth area, and you never know. It might be that comes to equal in popularity what's going on in the top line of the sport. But if that happens, it happens. That's the kind of the open market of that sport. If there's a demand for it, then you've got to follow that demand.
You're talking about your Channel 4 days and the coverage now. How can this sport appeal more to get new viewers? That's what
I was used to think if you go to areas, they're going to new countries, new territories, and putting it in front of countries that have wanted to have around the World Championship for a long time. That I think only really encourages more people to download the app, and pay the subscription, and watch it on all live. What we're thinking is, when are we going to see it on our TVs? Well, in a few years' time, the TV might not be even there because we'll be watching everything on a computer. Broadcasters might not be on television anymore. They all might be on an app. The coming of this new Rally TV, 24-hour TV station could be good. But I think I just think we're leaving behind places, to me, that to the promoter maybe don't make obvious commercial sense. And I'm thinking, why are we not in Argentina, but we are in Chile? Bound to be a commercial reason for that, Bob. But in Argentina, I've never seen crowds like it.
Easy. Yeah.
Why are we not in New Zealand? Apparently, New Zealand wanted to see how well regarded and accepted this year's round was before they committed. They couldn't commit in time, so they're not going to be on the calendar in 2023. Bound to be back in 24. Why? Because the roads are sensational, the views are great, and that's a place where we go. But the sport said to me 20 years ago, "Why are we here? We don't sell any cars."
Yep.
Okay, so they also said to me, "The only reason we do this is to sell cars." So maybe that's the model that needs to be looked at again. And then we'll maybe get a little bit closer to what it was in the kind of 60s and 70s, where you took the car, adapted it, found the driver, and it was the best driver in. It was the best driver that won it.
Absolutely.
It could go back there, and if it did, I wouldn't mind. Confidentially, off the record, and strictly between ourselves.
You think we'll ever see a time again, John, where we have the 7 or 8 manufacturers like we did back in 2000? You think that will come back? Personally, I can't see it. I don't know if 24 hours, the 24-hour television thing might help, but I cannot see it. I mean, I think with the green issues, people maybe see rallying as a bit a dirty sport now, and we're trying to go electric. And do you appease these people, the green people, or what about the fans who are kind of set against it?
Yeah, all of these questions have got to be answered, haven't they? It's the right thing that they've got hybrid units involved in the cars and they can drive off battery. That's a good thing. That's just following the market. Will there be other manufacturers out there that want to come in? Well, wouldn't it be fantastic if Subaru could find a car and put in it? But maybe is the sport too expensive for them? They can't. Have they looked at how much Toyota spend? They'll know that and said, there's no way we can invest that kind of money in a sport. But they could get involved at the R5, at Rally 2, at WRC2 level, perfectly willing and able to get involved there. They would want the eyes, they want the awareness to go with it, so they want the television program, or they'd want all of the internet coverage. I'm sure that can be developed as well. There's a good future ahead. There's a bright future ahead because there are so many people. When I look at the entry lists for some of these rounds of the World Championship, there are so many, entry lists. National championships get involved. Some of the old guys come back, some of the stars come back. We've got a junior championship. We just need to know that they're there and that the sport doesn't revolve around just 10 cars, and we always talk about the same people. It will.
Sorry, John.
It will mirror car manufacture. The car manufacturers, I think, still will dictate until privateers can get involved and do it in a way that they don't need the support, huge amounts of financial or logistic support from big manufacturers. At that point, there'll be lots of people get involved. And the car is going to be around for donkey's years. We know that because we like it so much. It's just how it's powered and whether we follow that or not.
Yeah. Well, let's hope so, John. Seriously. You're currently fronting that you're commentating on the highlights show. How are you enjoying that? The highlights after the event?
Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot because I feel like I'm working on the program that'll exist in years to come, and people will still be able to find it in years to come, which is quite a nice place to be. I'm honoured to be involved in that sort of coverage. And it's a bit of a skill, for a wordsmith to try and boil down everything that's happened in a day to all these people in about 26 minutes, I think it is, they give us on the half-hour show. That's quite a skill in itself. Mostly it works out and we get it right. As we used to say on Sky News, we're never wrong for long. But there is something about being there and being involved. I miss doing the recces. I miss driving the power stages. I used to love driving the power stages and trying to imagine what it would be like at these breakneck speeds that these guys go at. It's phenomenal skill. It's an incredible sight. And when you've got, I don't know, tens of thousands of people all waiting on one particular corner, I don't know, like the big jump at Faf right at the end of the rally, it has to be seen. Believe me, that's bigger than a football crowd. That's it. Places like Portugal have a real love for it, and they come out every year. Argentina is the same. So to be able to boil that down and try and do that justice in a half-hour TV program is quite something. So I hope I get somewhere near it.
Oh, anyway, some not personal, but some favourites questions. Your favourite driver?
Oh boy, favourite driver? What, now or in all time?
All time.
Boy. Well, Burns and I were quite close, but Richard Burns was never a good night out. Robert Reid was. Colin McRae was too much of a great night out, which is how he earned the name Rent-A-Party. And he was always fun to be around. And to see him drive, I understand why, Forests emptied when he came past, because they were the one that they wanted to see. Yep. I loved the attitude and the kind of tongue-in-cheek and the kind of dry personality of Chris Meek, and I was very happy to be able to share some wins with him over the last few years. Currently, at the moment, who would be my favourite driver? Well, I've got to say Kalle Rovanperä is great to watch simply because he doesn't seem to understand what all the fuss is about, and he just gets in a car and drives it the way he does, as though he's in his happy place, in his comfort zone. What's the big deal? I've been doing this since I got out of a pram. So he's great to watch. But the guy I really hope has a happy future ahead of him is Chris Ingram, who we've just seen Chris from Manchester, we've just seen briefly in WRC2 this season, and he's trying to get a campaign together for next year, for 2023, because he's genuinely fast, but he's in that place where he just cannot get money together for this campaign. And we need others to be around so that we've got favourite drivers in the future that we can talk about. Craig Breen was a lot of fun. I like having Craig around. I liked his attitude, but I think maybe he wore his heart on his sleeve too much and needed to just take sort of 10% off what he was doing and add it to the driving. Seb Loeb is too cool for school. You know, he can get all those titles and drink a pint and smoke a cigarette.
Who's better? Which of the Sebs is the best?
Oh, well, Seb Ogier won multiple titles in multiple cars and brands. Seb Loeb didn't. Although Seb Ogier will never match him now with a ninth, I don't think. Seb Ogier is a great diplomat and a great ambassador and a very well-mannered, very organised, very ruthless guy. And really, there's only Seb Ogier that needs to worry about Seb Ogier. There's nothing else to bother him, and he's not going to be bothered by anything else. It is the Seb Ogier show. Thank you very much. And he's proved that he's very able. And so he's a little callous and maybe a little too sharp at times. And you know, Seb Loeb, it just happened. Almost, Bob, he was almost too good. He almost ruined the sport. And I'm sure other manufacturers and drivers thought there's no point in getting involved in the World Rally Championship. It's a Citroen gig. It's just a monopoly of Citroen. I
stopped watching the sport, John. I stopped watching the WRC because he was just too dominant.
Yeah, too dominant. And people must have looked at it and thought, there's no point in us putting a car in there. We're not going to get a shirt. We're not going to get a look in. The best time recently, sadly, I had to say, it was when VW decided they would pull the team. And then, lo and behold, the whole thing opened up. And 2017 Rally Great Britain, to me, was one of the great moments. The end of that rally was fantastic to do live commentary on, when so many things were happening for Malcolm and for M Sport and for Elvin. Incredible. And Seb Ogier had gone from, you know, best money, best car, best team, best food, best doctors, best weather, everything best in VW, and gone to Malcolm and said, tell you what, I'll come and drive for you. And then he repeated it with M Sport as well. That was fantastic for me. So the Ogier years at M Sport they were exhilarating. They were a roller coaster. You had to strap yourself in for those. And suddenly it became very even. Lots of people were winning. It wasn't a one-man show. It wasn't the Ogier show all the time. And that's what we want. A variety. We want battles, we want drama, we want close finishes.
That's two questions you've not answered directly, though. The first one was, who's your favourite driver? And the second one was, which of the Sebs was the best?
Yeah. Favourite driver was Jon Desborough. He drove a Subaru Impreza, and we did a few rounds together in Ireland, and he was a gentleman and showed me the art of wrecking and co-driving. Okay. Jon Desborough of Castlederg in Tyrone. Very, very nice man. Robbie Head was not my favourite driver because he almost killed me on the McRae stages in 2002. Okay. More people watched that and paid attention to that than anything else I ever did on TV. Almost been killed by Robbie Head. Is that any good? Does that answer the question? Have I avoided those questions?
You've not avoided the Seb one. Sorry, you have avoided the second. We'll let you go. It's too much of a... It's okay. I'm sure you know them both. So we'll just leave it there. Yeah. Who was the most... in the old days, in the 80s and 90s, it was Alain was the one you didn't want to open the door to and speak to if it had a bad stage. Who since then is the one you're a bit wary of? Who's a grumpy git?
Oh, well, Seb Ogier can be a little bit frosty. He's got an edge. Chris Meek could when things weren't right. I mean, they all could at times, and I can understand why, because we were in their faces 3-4 times a day. And I think if that someone was coming up to me saying, "How's your show going together, John?" I'd run off and come up with a sharp word or two for them. Jari Matti-Latvala was always late out, and he'd always have far too much to say. I don't know. It was Payden. Payden Padden was always a good interview. I liked him a lot. I suppose what we're in danger of missing is the character of Colin McRae and the kind of dry wit and sarcasm of Richard Burns. We need the personality and character of those guys are not around so much now because I feel they've been shackled by all the corporate interests. They daren't put a foot out of line or say anything that they shouldn't do because there's always a camera everywhere. And 20 years ago, man, if there was the coverage and the cameras that we have today, 20 years ago, when we were doing the Channel 4 coverage with Richard and Colin, boy, we would all be in so much trouble. And you could make a program out of that, and all of our reputations would be ruined because it was such a great time traveling the world with them.
We're so fortunate, John, weren't we, to have these guys. It's
Yep.
incredible that they're taken away from us, and they were so good. How
Yep.
it's I mean, when I grew up watching the sport in the 80s, it was all dominated by the Finns. Nobody had won it since Roger Clark, the RAC. And to think that a few years later, with two British world champions, not including Louise, of course, but to have two Brits winning the title, it's incredible. And then they're taken away from us. It's incredible.
But we need to start by somehow asking ourselves, number one, is rally as we know it the place for the future for them to drive in? If so, and it is, then, where are 14, 15-year-olds? Or if you take the Kalle Rovanperä route, where are the 9, 10-year-olds? Let's get them in some cars now. How do we know if they've got it? Well, in Kalle's case, his father made him that way because he had him in a car so early. Jimmy and Colin, Jimmy and Alistair. They grew up in a family where bikes and cars were just, second... what's the word I'm looking for? They were second nature. They were there. In a way, Richard Byrne should never have been a world champion because he just didn't come from that sort of a family. How do you find that talent? Because the talent that's actually being presented is perhaps only the one that's got the money. And professionally, you get paid for it. Not that you're necessarily any good. How do we find these kids who are just going into senior school, and what sort of car do we put them in, and what do we want to know about them? And then in 10 years' time, let us have the Kalle Rovanperä.
Well, I think the British Rally Championship is maybe struggling a little bit, has been for a few years now. When that was obviously, it was of higher grade years ago when there's a lot more manufacturers came into it, and it was the rung down from the WRC. But now great national drivers are just not bothering with the BRC. A lot of that's down to cost,
Mm.
That's
why I say maybe we have to look at what goes on nationally in our country and ask, is that the right place for the best young drivers of the generation, however old that is determined to be, 12, 13, 14, maybe early? Is that the best place for them to be, or should they be doing something else? I don't know. But somehow we've got to have the first kind of rung or two of the ladder in place to find out where these great drivers are and develop them, and then push them on to bigger and better things. What it is, I don't know, and it's you need a cleverer person than me to come up with an answer to that one. But the BRC, and I know the time you're talking about. Well, that was when it was almost like a world championship in itself, because all the names came here because they all wanted to drive on the great roads, they all wanted to do the forests, they all wanted to go to the famous places, and that's where you learnt your championship driving, your world championship driving was learnt on those stages. Those times won't come back, will they?
No, absolutely not.
But we've got to find the youngsters. I look in a year's time, we'll be talking about Kalle Rovanperä winning a second back-to-back championship, and we will have lost another year finding. I don't know, what do you do? The best young Welsh, the best young Scots, the best young English.
You mentioned Chris Ingram. I was fortunate enough to interview Chris a couple of months ago in here. And you're right, he's a fantastic driver. He's struggling for the cash to get into WRC2 again. How do we help? He's a youngster. How do we help somebody like him? Maybe he's getting older, certainly, but I don't know if the MSUK, it's not really their job to pump money into a youngster, but what can we do for these youngsters when they've got an obvious talent?
Well, the obvious answer with Chris is give him £1 million and let him show him what you can do. But he's one billionaire sponsor short of a world championship, which is why it makes me think we've got to start a lot younger than that. I just hope Chris isn't part of another forgotten generation that were, had great potential and nothing more. It's where it is at the moment. It is what it is, and if we can't find the money, then you simply can't get involved. So let's try and do it at a cheaper level, where we produce rally drivers before we produce drivers that are actually of a legal age to go out and drive on the public roads. I don't know. It's a hard question. It's got a difficult answer. it's a problem, and I'm glad it's not my problem.
Mm-hmm. Just a couple more questions, John. Who should we be looking at next year to impress us? Obviously, Cali. Do you think Elfyn can? Do you think Elfyn has got a world championship in him?
I did. I thought 2021 should have been his, because I could see Kalle Rovanperä, as soon as he got in the car and got going, got his feet on the pedals, would be unstoppable. I think next year, 23, is going to be another Kalle Rovanperä challenge. The difficulty is that Elvin's in a Finnish run team, and they've got a Finnish driver. And, you don't need me to tell you how that'll work out. It's also got to deal with Seb Ogier. It is a phenomenal task. But the golden rule is always being the best car, and I still think that Toyota is the best car. M Sport and Oitanek, man. Matt, if you want to see, showbiz on wheels, if you want to see blind determination, a fearless blind determination, it's right there. To see Malcolm must be rubbing his hands together. He must. This is Christmas of Christmases. He can't wait for the season to start, because he just wants to let that bloke loose on Kalle Rovanperä. And I think we've answered that question. It's those two, which again is bad news for Elfyn, because he'll just get left behind. And it's a mental thing as much as anything else. I'm sure you have got to drain your head when you're driving at that speed. And, now Elfyn is thinking of the ones that got away. It's human, isn't it, to think about, here we go again, because that's another one I've let go away. Kalle Rovanperä doesn't think that. I don't think Oitanek thinks that. They're certainly not doing it.
I think he's got a championship in him.
Thierry. Well, he's a very positive bloke. He's a lovely guy. He's a great interview. He's a very corporate guy. He's a very charming, accommodating guy. But, I think he needs to just throw all that away and concentrate on winning rallies and nothing else. But otherwise, he's just going to be known as the nearly man. I've lost count of the number of championships where he's come second. But we're kind of getting used to him coming second or third. And if Kalle and Oitanek go at it in 2023, then he's going to come third, isn't he?
Okay. Two more, John. Sorry, John. So, two more. Your favourite car, your favourite rally car in the last 20 odd years?
Oh, well, I think it's behind me. It's the blue one with the golden wheels.
Okay.
Yeah, that one. Although, having said that, only because it comes from that golden age. Burns and McRae were both involved in it. And I just loved that. I just loved hearing that thing start up in the morning. It was terrific. I loved seeing it drive. There was nothing that sat on a gravel or a tarmac road quite like that Impreza. I would love to have one myself of about 98, 99, 2000 vintage. But as my wife points out to me, I don't know what I'm doing in it. I'll kill myself. So it's better I have something a little bit softer and more forgiving. I loved some of the Citroen Zara I loved on tarmac. The Fiesta I loved on tarmac as well. Don't go with the what's the best looking car at the moment? I think it's the Puma. Of the three, it's the best looker, which is a real shame why they've seemed to have gone backwards in the last year. What else have we had? I liked that Hyundai back in 2003. Was it an Accent? I thought, the one that Kankkunen and Alistair were in. I thought that was a beautiful looking car as well.
Oh, you're talking about the F2 one or the four-wheel drive WRC?
No, the full WRC2. And, to people like me who don't understand how to drive, we can't drive that way. We don't really understand what goes on underneath the skin. We just get turned on by the way they look and what they do on a stage. That's what you got to worry about. That's the big thing.
Actually, I was lucky enough to be out in the ex-Alistair McRae Hyundai a couple of years ago. Oh, it's fantastic! Unbelievable, eh?
I'll give you 10 minutes, Bob.
I've been lucky enough because of my media stuff to be in a few WRC and R5 cars, and it's like you said, it's incredible. And it's like going to the fairground, but better. It's the buzz you get. Can
I steal that? That's a great line. It's like going to the fairground, but better.
Final question: what does it? I know television's quite fickle. What's the future hold for Jon Desborough?
Ooh. Well, I'm glad that so far I've been able to determine my future, or my present and my future. In each of my spells, I've been the one that said, goodbye, I'm off. Nobody's taken me to one side and said, please leave. What does the future hold? I hope I can still keep doing this, because I am actually in my 7th decade, as you'll find out if you look me up on Google. So I'd love to be able to carry on doing this for as long as is possible, because as I say, I'm not very good at any other proper jobs that people would have. I've got a distracted mind, I've got a butterfly mind, and the only thing that concentrates it is getting in one of those cars or watching them and trying to turn it into words. So I'll just carry on doing the same if I can, please, Bob.
I'm going to give you another quick one. What's your favourite ever memory in the sport?
Oh, boy, favourite ever memory. That is very, very hard, man. There could be. I'll tell you the 1999. McRae goes to Ford. I get a phone call saying, "Do you want a passenger ride with Colin McRae?" I've got an idea who he is. I understand about him and the game, and I get invited up to Greystoke, and I'm standing on the road, which I think is the road that still goes to Sellafield. And there's a hospitality truck there, and they're serving cups of coffee. And McRae is doing laps in the forest. And then eventually a guy comes over and says to me, "It's your turn." And amazingly, I actually did it in a jacket and a pair of trousers. I didn't have any kind of fireproof overalls on, which is probably why I went so slow as he did. At least I think he was going slowly. Don't remember it at the time, but I remember getting in the car and they strapped me in. And as they strap you into a 5-point belt, if you've never been in, had 5 belts strap you into a seat like that, that's when you start to concentrate, and that's when the pulse races from about 60 to about 160. Then the helmet went on, and they plugged in the pelter. And at that point, Colin hasn't looked at me at all. He's just sitting there thinking, can we get this over and done with? I need to get back to the hotel. And I can hear him breathe, and I can feel my pulse in my temple throbbing away. And at that point, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to break the ice, because everything was kind of shaking, and I just didn't know what I was going to be in for. So I turned to him and I said, "Hi, Colin. It's Jon Desborough from Sky News. I just wanted to say hello, and can I ask, have you driven this stage before? Because we've gone round it. We've gone round it in the camera car, and we kind of identified where we'd sit a camera, and then after the first lap we'd move a camera. It was those sort of days, no onboard, and it was a lot of gravel, a lot of pine trees, a few lefts, a few rights, what have you. But it all finished with a kind of big crest where the bottom of the car bottom out, and then we go up a crest of about, I don't know, size of a house. On the right-hand side, there's a pile of logs the size of a shop. And on the left-hand side, there's a 300-foot drop, and there's a field of cows in there. That was the bit that was worrying me, Bob, because it was that narrow to get through. And I'm thinking, logs, cows, drop, I need to know. And the great man turned to me and he said, no, I haven't driven the stage. Today's the first time. And at that point, that was when the bum started to squeak.
What an experience!
A happy introduction. And actually, apart from getting driven around Knock Hill by him many years later, which is an entirely different story. Man, that was incredible. Boy, that really was. I thought I was going to die. I thought I was going to snap my neck going around, and that was in a radical. Boy, yeah, it's phenomenal, unbelievable what they can do, and that they can keep concentrating, keep focused, and do with the car what they do. But there we are.
I think they're superhuman, John. I do. They're superhuman, these people.
Yeah, and if we got to find some superhuman Brits wherever they come from in Britain, we got to find these people when they're about 10 or 11 years old.
Absolutely, John. It's been absolutely fantastic talking to you.
Well, thank you.
All night, honestly, it's just been great. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. And please watch the next time on the Rally Show. And thank you very much to 5-Star Vehicle Delivery for sponsoring the show. Thanks again, John, and thanks for watching, everyone.
My pleasure.
You.